So just, I was thinking very, for the last days, quite how to do an introduction here. This probably is one of the more terrifying things that I've done to stand and introduce the Hepworth research network in front of so many experts in this particular field. I'm going to start actually by just saying a big thank you and making an apology. So the big thank you is to Eleanor, who really has driven this and has been the energy behind all of this, really. I did a quick check, and it was actually the 10th of January 2017 that you first mentioned this to me when we started our conversation. In the meantime, I've had 2 children, and really has put up with my prevarications and busyness with other things in actually getting a lot of this moving. So many apologies to Eleanor for all of that, but it's absolutely fantastic that we're here together now. So in terms of talking a bit about the network and what its aspirations might be, I thought I'd also do this through another kind of thing that's been happening over the last few years, which is how relevant this is actually for the University of York in relation to an object in our collection, which is what you see here, single form antiphon 1969. You see it in its previous location just outside the Jack Lyons Concert Hall on the University of York campus. So actually, looking back through my old emails around the Hepworth Research Network, was a whole series of other emails which are about our concerns about this particular artwork. And I thought to tell you a little bit about the history of its arrival at the University of York and our deliberations since, because I think that actually they feed directly into some of the things that we might be doing over the next a couple of days. So the story about how this gets to the University of York, I won't go through the full details, but the connection really is to do with Margaret Reed, Ludo Reed, and then widow of Sir Herbert Reed, who was made an honorary doctorate of the University of York in the 1960s, and she had contacts with the music department, and then facilitated the acquisition of this particular sculpture, which was acquired by the university for just its casting costs. Those are the only costs that Barbara Hepworth asked for. So it's a wonderful thing to have, essentially a gift of some kind. The casting costs were paid by Sir William Crosthwaite, who's the mayor of Middlesbrough. That's a sort of connection that I'm yet to kind of fully work out. He must have had a connection with the University of York in its early days. Then, so arrived in 1970 and was installed next to the Jack Lyons Concert Hall, adjacent to the music department, because of that connection to music, both in the title of the work and its route into the campus. It then moved briefly in 2003 and was exhibited at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park as part of the Barbara Hepworth Centenary exhibition of that year. So we see it there. I've got another one, view of it from the side, where it received a small amount of conservation and then returned subsequently to York after that, and actually moved about 2 metres from where it had been before. I don't know quite exactly why well, that particular bush location was deemed to be the most appropriate, but it's a kind of indicative of the sort of lack of curatorial skills generally in the University of York, which are kind of ongoing, I must say. Then, say just about the time that Alan and I started our conversation, it became subject to kind of attention that it had not had for a great many years. It had been quietly situated in a very kind of modest position for some 40 odd years. But I had raised some concerns about it, to try to alert the university to its value, both financial value and cultural value, and that's something we should be alert and concerned about. certainly when the university went through a process of discussing the value of certain items with its insurer, this was certainly seen to be a potential risk to have sculpture in its current location. So Antiphon went on a holiday. Basically, this was very, very interesting for me. It's not something I see happen every day. It was a team from the Yorkshire Sculpture Park coming and de-installing it. So it was two guys and a truck and a hook there, you can see, and they did it incredibly carefully, and with great care and attention. It took them no more than half an hour, basically, to get it off its concrete plinth and in the back of a lorry, and off they went. It just made me think about someone who wasn't paying so much care and attention, how quickly they might have done that particular job. So it received some conservation from Laura, I believe, actually, and then came here for a period of time, where its first appearance was in the disobedient bodies, J.W. Anderson, get the title of it, curates the Hepworth Wakefield show from March to June 2017. And it was really remarkable to come see it in its new context, in a gallery display, first having been outside for all of that time before, in relation to some really kind of extraordinary other objects, in a show actually about some really interesting materials and material practices, fabrics and textiles and clothing, which really, it must look like a completely different sculpture in many ways. We can talk about this much later. Obviously it has changed its patination quite dramatically, from that green to this rich brown. It was due to return to the University of York shortly after that, and this is a slightly comical image. So we don't have anyone in the university whose task it really is to curate the collection. That's something that's being resolved right now, and actually people in the room might be, if you know people, very shortly, I believe that a job advert will be going out for a 0.5 curatorial position to ensure that actually we can look after our collection properly. Anyway, this was the result of myself and the head of estates roaming the entire campus, thinking about a place actually we could put this in sculpture. None of the buildings on the University of York have been made for the display of art, and especially not such a fine piece of sculpture as this. And rather remarkably, having really done a massive tour of every possible building we could think of, we ended up almost back to where we started. And this is us actually just experimenting, as you see, with some cardboard tubes to find out actually whether it would fit. Because one of the things we discovered is just simply things to do with ceiling heights. Just really were struggling to find somewhere that we could just fit the sculpture in. But it was a really instructive exercise, because it discovered in the process that we couldn't get really accurate information about actually the size of the sculpture. We had material from our own records, and then we had, comparing that with other casts in other collections, all seemed to actually say it was a slightly different height. And I couldn't work out quite why that should be. That's a question. That's a big open question for all of you in the room later. What point it was being measured from, and it was a big concern, because you can see that from the top of that cardboard tube we only had about 20 centimetres to play with, and thinking about someone coming in with this on a pallet and how they might get it on and off was a bit of a concern. But anyway, it was a success in the end. Well, success to the extent we got it into the space. So another reason for putting it there was that it had some friends. We see on your right there a bust of Vaughan Williams by Jacob Epstein, and on the left David Wynne bust of Thomas Beecham. So I actually had some sculpture to keep it company in this space. So then in the end of think to a date it came back. So at the end of 2018, it returned to campus and went into this particular space, and this is a photograph I took of it just yesterday, so this is a very, very current installation view. It's in a space that is known as the Rosalind Lyons Gallery, but actually it's a kind of corridor between the Jack Lyons Concert Hall and the Music Research Centre that has some other kind of works of art in it. So there's sculptures that I mentioned. Actually some bits of pottery now that are some things actually being produced on campus in our pottery studio on campus, which I can talk about later. And there it is. And it's actually a mere 30 metres away from actually where it started, and this spot in the bushes, just through the windows up there. Now I thought I'd tell that story because it's involved quite a lot of kind of interesting things for me. A sculpture that I'm relatively familiar with, having walked past very, very frequently on my way to my office, familiarity with it being there, looking the way it did. Now to see it actually extremely different in appearance, now to consider actually where we might move it from outside to inside, now actually having seen it to some extent demystified as an object, actually just sort of witnessed it actually as a lump of metal to be moved, raised loads and loads of questions for me actually about its material properties. And that's really where a lot of the thinking around this particular network is hopefully going to find some of its energy and focus around questions of materials, materiality. And it's this really, through this process, say that also a conversation I started with Eleanor really productively opened up through contact with Annika and the Centre for Sculptural Thinking at the University of Huddersfield. Barbara Hepworth offers an incredibly exceptional resource, it seems to me. The collections, the archives, the library, material here and at Tate, surviving physical studio space, tools, and its extraordinary array of materials for considering a particular material practice, an opportunity to consider sculpture and sculptural practices in the widest sense. Also through the lens of materiality, really to kind of open up in an interdisciplinary way and think about the relationship to conservation, to curation, and to practice. I think this is going to be incredibly productive and exciting. This is very nice to see, just has been recently digitised actually on the Tate website. There we go. 7 house there, and the University of York already listed as the first recipient. Now, so what do we mean by materiality? That's something for us to think through over the next day and a half and beyond, I very much hope, and say to combine the kind of collective expertise here, to understand Hepworth's engagement with materials, the combination of chemistry and artistry. That might involve thinking about weight and measure and viewpoint and surface, but it also is about how they connect for me, to other values and ideas. So materiality is our understanding of the relationship between the material and the immaterial. So this is not a kind of materialism. This is all not just reducing it to just stuff, but actually thinking about how we get from the stuff to the ideas. You might think about that actually, what the hell is he talking about? How we might conceive the difference between something like cultural property and cultural heritage. It's not all about a kind of physical thing. It's about a set of ideas that can be handed down and collectively shared. Now, this is just very interesting to think about material and immaterial, and how the notion of materiality is something that works between them. So this is single form antiphon in its 1953 boxwood version at the Ashmolean. This I found really, really fascinating. This is a recent post by the Ashmolean on their Facebook site, which has posted a detail of it. That section there, actually where you can see some rather kind of large cracking in the wood. So something that's taking us somehow closer to the material in the sense of its woodenness, and its changing nature as a material, that actually it is physically changing. It's not stopped in time, it's continuing to have a life as an object, but is being communicated now through something digital, something highly immaterial. I thought it was just really, really interesting to think about kind of the virtualization of this sculpture and the kind of, say, the extended life it's having and the different audiences that it's reaching. For me, I've just been together with Annika and Eleanor putting together an AHRC research network grant application that will hopefully fund more of this activity, awaiting its outcome. And for that, to write about the beneficiaries of such research. I see myself to some extent as a beneficiary, as someone who has an interest in a Barbara Hepworth sculpture as a custodian of it, actually to find out a lot more about it and actually to understand it far more deeply than I do currently. So I've been looking around at other casts of single form antiphon and really struck actually by their differences, particularly in patination. So this is two others, one in Mount Holyoke College Museum and the other in Milwaukee. And thinking about how our close attention to Hepworth's very kind of idiosyncratic and close attention and thoughts about materials and their uses can really help me as an art historian make certain kind of moves from conventional practices of interpretation to those around presentation, around experience, and around encounter that will hopefully, say, really kind of broaden my horizons. We might also just think that certain kind of immaterial qualities of Hepworth are not necessary to be totally discounted. The increasing financial value, actually, of this sculpture has led to its transformation in the kind of the York version. If it hadn't had become so valuable, it wouldn't have gone on the particular journey that it has. It wouldn't have changed its appearance in the way that it has. I was going to show you this extraordinary little visualization that Christie's put on. I'll see if I can get this to work. Maybe it won't. Oh, there we go. Again, just thinking about the different ways in which you can experience a Hepworth sculpture these days. See if this is going to do it. If it doesn't, if you look at that particular part of the website, you will see a 3D virtual visualization of it where the sculpture actually spins. Let's leave that. It'll do its thing. Also just very interested in what differences there might be between the different casts. Just really simple things. I'm not sure that the University of York cast of Antiphon has this Morris Singer Foundry London on it. I've not seen it, but maybe I've not looked hard enough. And I've also got a question that's just, it's doing its thing now. It's doing its thing. I'll shut that down. Now you're all intrigued, aren't you? Let's see if it actually does it. Let's see if the technology works. Because it is quite interesting when it does. I'll give it 10 more seconds and then I'll close it. we go. Is that worth waiting for? It excited me. There we go. So I've actually got one question for the combined expertise in this room, and it might be a question you probably just tell me, Michael. It's very obvious why this and this, you know, and it all can be solved in a sentence. But why is it that in the different casts of single form antiphon sculptures, either on one side or the other of this base, it's not consistent throughout the 7 versions, and I have no idea why. It's something I've only just noticed recently by looking at its different presentations, and I'm really intrigued now. Really intrigued about the choices that have been made at various stages in the production of this object and the consequences for their future life. So that's a kind of sketch of my kind of interest here. I'm really excited of what's going to emerge out of these various conversations. I think there's enormous potential in this room, as much as people might actually know each other reasonably well already. I think hopefully we're going to venture into some new areas and generate some new thoughts on Hepworth. So that's basically all I have to say to get us going. And I'm going to hand over to Annika now.